Late afternoon at Mercy Heights Medical Center. Sunlight poured through the towering glass panels, casting long shadows on the polished floor. Daniel Reed, celebrity CEO of a major private equity firm, stepped out of the elevator, phone still pressed to his ear. His expensive suit looked oddly out of place among the sea of white lab coats, but Daniel didn't care. This was just a routine checkup, one of many scheduled by his executive assistant to keep his health on track. But then a voice echoed from the hospital intercom, freezing the bustling lobby. Code red, AB negative blood, urgently needed. Patient in critical condition. Any donors currently in the hospital, please report to the emergency department on the 3rd floor. Daniel paused. He was AB negative, a rare blood type, and he'd never had an actual chance to use it. Without thinking twice, he ended the call and headed straight for the elevators. Something pulled him there, something he couldn't explain. Minutes later, a nurse guided him to the maternity wing. The air was tense. Urgent footsteps echoed down the hall as medical staff rushed past. A nurse began prepping him for a rapid blood donation, but stopped mid-sentence. "We need you in the delivery room itself. The mother is hemorrhaging. Your blood type is her only chance." Daniel nodded, rolling up his sleeve, no hesitation. But when the delivery room doors swung open, his world collapsed. Amara Cole, the woman writhing in pain on the birthing table, sweat and tears streaking her face, was the same woman he had once loved and walked away from without a single explanation. Exactly 9 months ago. Monitors beeped rapidly. A doctor hovered over the first newborn, resuscitating the baby. Another nurse was urging Amara to push again. Blood soaked the sheets beneath her. Amara opened her eyes, and when they locked onto Daniel, terror turned into pure fury. "Get out!" she screamed, her voice cracking with pain and betrayal. "Get the hell out of here!" Daniel stood frozen, but the doctors wouldn't let him leave. They needed his blood. "You're her only hope," one of them said. "If we don't act now, she won't survive." Amara heard it. Her eyes closed, tears slipped out, and for the first time in months, something broke inside Daniel. Guilt, sharper than he'd ever known. One of the babies cried. The doors shut behind him, and all Daniel was left with was the echo of Amara's scream, and the first cry of children he didn't even know were his. 9 months ago, New York was entering one of its gentlest autumns in years. Leaves floated down onto the brownstone steps of Brooklyn, where a charity fundraiser for public schools was in full swing. Inside the brightly lit hall, among expensive tuxedos and elegant gowns, Amara Cole was carefully balancing a tray of hors d'oeuvres. She didn't belong here, and she knew it. A public school teacher in the Bronx, Amara had volunteered to help out for the evening. She wasn't expecting anything, until her elbow knocked a glass of red wine and it spilled straight across her dress. "Oh no!" Amara gasped, scrambling to cover the stain, but before she could flee, a man stepped in, offering her a napkin with a gentle smile. "Looks like you could use a rescue." It was Daniel Reed. Sharp eyes, well-kept hair, and a calm presence that was both disarming and magnetic. He didn't smile with arrogance like most wealthy men she'd met. He looked like he genuinely cared. Their story began with a spilled glass. Then came coffee the next day, a walk through Central Park, and late nights filled with conversations about everything from children's books to childhood trauma. Daniel told her his father had left when he was 5. Amara shared stories of her mother working 2 jobs to raise 2 daughters on her own. 2 different worlds, but they understood each other. Daniel hadn't laughed so much in years, and Amara, for the first time in a long while, allowed herself to dream about a man who could be a husband, maybe even a father. Everything unfolded naturally, no labels, no declarations of love, but the intimacy between them felt inevitable. Until Amara found out she was pregnant. Her hands trembled as she held the test, tears welled in her eyes, not from fear, but from a fragile hope that maybe this could be their new beginning. That night, she went to Daniel's penthouse. He had just returned from a business trip in Miami, tired and reserved as always. Amara wrapped her arms around him and whispered, "I have something to tell you." He nodded, expression unreadable. When she said the words, "I'm pregnant," Daniel stood up instantly. No yelling, no reaction, just a chilling, heavy silence. "Are you sure?" "Very sure." "Okay, I think you should do whatever's best for you." No concern, no offer of support, just cold detachment. Then he disappeared into his bedroom, leaving Amara frozen on the couch. The next day she texted. No reply. She called, no one answered. After a week, his assistant, polite but robotic, sent her an email. "Mr. Reed is not available for personal correspondence at this time. Thank you for your understanding." And that was the end. Amara carried the pregnancy alone. Through the nausea and dizziness of the first trimester, she kept teaching, still helping kids learn their letters. She hid her belly under oversized sweaters, bought baby supplies quietly, and signed up for maternity insurance. No Daniel, no call, no questions. She cried, of course, but eventually the tears ran out. She promised herself, if her child had to grow up without a father, then at least it would have a mother who never walked away. The air in the delivery room was thick, like a storm trapped behind glass. The sounds of suction machines, fetal heart monitors, Amara's cries, they merged into a terrifying chaos that pulsed through every corner. Daniel stood frozen at the threshold. His sleeve was still rolled up, the imprint of the tourniquet still visible on his arm. His body was here, but his soul was unraveling. He had mastered boardrooms, led billion-dollar deals, but right now, he couldn't move an inch toward the woman he had destroyed. Amara lay on the delivery table, soaked in sweat and blood, her eyes wide with a pain that reached beyond physical. She saw him instantly, and in that moment her expression wasn't one of a woman giving birth, but one of someone betrayed to the bone. "Get out," she screamed, voice breaking with agony and disgust. "Get the hell out, Daniel." The nurse looked to the doctor. The doctor turned to Daniel. "We need his blood. She's losing too much." "I don't care," Amara shouted again. "Don't let him near me." Daniel opened his mouth, perhaps to apologize, to explain, but nothing came out. Everything he had ever orchestrated, every boardroom he'd ever controlled, meant nothing in the face of her rage. Blood was pooling beneath the sheet. One baby had already been delivered, not crying, pale. Doctors worked frantically to restore its fragile heartbeat. Amara, drifting in and out of consciousness, never took her eyes off Daniel. "Do you even know what you did?" she whispered, not screamed now, but shattered. "You left me. You left your child. And now you want to be the hero?" Daniel stepped back. The doctor nodded to the nurse, who spoke quietly. "You need to come in. Every second matters." Daniel inhaled sharply and crossed the threshold. Amara looked at him as if he had just stabbed her in the heart. "I hate you," she whispered. "I wish you never came." A soft cry broke through the tension. One of the babies had begun to whimper. A nurse carried the infant aside, gently cleaning and swaddling it. Daniel didn't know if it was his son or daughter. All he knew was that something inside his chest tightened with unbearable pressure. He wasn't allowed to touch, wasn't allowed to come close. After giving blood, Daniel was escorted out of the room, the door slammed behind him. He stood in the hallway, his body cold, his hands trembling. Amara's sister, Lana, appeared moments later. Her face was stone, her eyes sharp with fury. "He almost died," Lana said. "You're lucky the doctors needed you, otherwise you would have done even more damage." Daniel said nothing. He nodded barely. Then, his voice dry and raw, he asked, "The babies, are they okay?" Lana stared at him for a long moment, then turned her back. "You don't have the right to ask." Daniel sank into a stiff wooden chair in the hallway. The yellow lights cast long shadows across his pale face. For the first time in years, he didn't feel like Daniel Reed, power broker. He was just a man, broken by the weight of his own choices. What filled him wasn't just regret. It was a fear he had never known, that what he had lost might never be his again. Daniel sat motionless in the third-floor hallway for nearly an hour. No phone, no laptop, no assistant buzzing in his ear. Just him, a cold wooden chair, and the faint buzz of flickering fluorescent lights above. Every passing second struck like a hammer against his conscience. He tried to picture the babies. His babies. Did they have his sharp eyes? Amara's soft smile? But he didn't have the right to imagine them. He didn't even know their genders. He knew nothing. Only one thing was certain. He had left at the exact moment she needed him most. And now redemption felt like a fantasy slipping further out of reach. The echo of heels clicked against the tile floor. Lana returned. Her eyes were softer, but her voice still cut cold. She's stable, for now. Daniel stood up, hope pulling at a single thread of his composure. The babies. Lana didn't look away this time. One boy, one girl, they both made it, but don't think for a second that means you're part of any of this. Daniel nodded. He didn't protest. There was nothing left to defend. What are their names? He asked quietly. Lana hesitated, only for a moment, then released the words like an unexpected mercy. Leona Grace. And Eli Daniel. The second name hit him like a blow to the chest. Ellie Daniel. Amara had named their son after him, despite the pain, despite the abandonment. Somewhere in all that heartbreak, she left behind a thread of memory carrying his name. And Daniel, the man who once believed he could separate business from emotion, now stood stripped bare. Just a man who had lost the most precious thing before he even realized what it was. He couldn't change the past, but for the first time in his life, Daniel Reed feared something greater than failure. He feared he had lost the right to be a father, forever. But fear, even when overwhelming, wasn't enough to stop Daniel from doing what his heart never thought it would: fight for the right to be a father. 3 days after Amara was discharged, Daniel met with his family law attorney in a small Manhattan office. He didn't wear his usual dark suit or silk tie. That day, he wore a simple sweater and jeans. Not to seem approachable, but because for the first time he had nothing to prove except sincerity. His attorney, Carla, a seasoned woman with calm eyes, listened quietly as Daniel told his story. When he finished, she set her pen down and asked, "What exactly do you want, Daniel?" He didn't hesitate. "I want to be legally recognized as their father, and I want to see my children." She nodded slowly. "Mara's not going to agree. If she contests it, we'll have to go to court." Daniel looked out the window. "I know." The following week, Amara received a legal notice. She nearly crumpled it in her fist. Lana was even angrier than she was. "He wants father's rights? He gave that up the moment he left you." Amara didn't respond. She didn't cry. She just went quiet. Staring at her twins asleep in the bassinet beside her bed, she felt like the world was testing how much she could take. 2 weeks later, they stood across from each other in a small family courtroom. The judge, both attorneys, and a few witnesses were present. Amara wore a simple dress, her hair tied back. Daniel didn't say anything beyond a mechanical greeting to the judge. The hearing began. Carla argued that Daniel was the biological father and had a legal right to acknowledgement. Mara's lawyer, Kevin, a representative from a legal aid group, replied, "Being a biological father doesn't make you a real father. He was absent the entire pregnancy, offered no support, and only showed up at the birth by coincidence." Carla countered, "He donated blood and saved the mother's life. He's here now and ready to take responsibility." Amara was asked to speak. She stood, voice trembling but gaze steady. "I don't deny he's the biological father, but fatherhood isn't DNA. It's presence, and he wasn't there." The room fell silent. The judge issued a temporary ruling. Daniel would be allowed weekly supervised visits on Saturdays at a family center. No outdoor trips, no overnight stays. All interactions would be monitored and recorded. Daniel didn't argue, he just nodded. Amara said nothing more either, but her eye still held the fracture, the wound that hadn't begun to close. The first visit took place in a small center in Queens. Daniel arrived 15 minutes early. He sat in the playroom with two stuffed bears, palms sweating. When Amara walked in holding the twins, his heart stopped. Leona was asleep in her arms. Eli looked around with wide, dark eyes. Daniel didn't reach for them. He didn't dare. But then Eli shifted, reaching toward Daniel not from memory, just instinct, and when those tiny fingers closed around his, Daniel felt his throat tighten. He had signed million-dollar deals without blinking, but a single touch from his son made him want to cry. Amara said nothing, but for the first time in months, she looked at him not with rage, but with the eyes of someone asking, could this man still make something right? But Daniel knew better than anyone. Supervised visits didn't make him a father. If he truly wanted to change, not just on paper, but in the hearts of the two children and the woman he once left, he would have to start with the man in the mirror. Saturday visits with the twins became Daniel's new heartbeat. He counted the days, the hours, for those brief moments with Leona and Eli. But deep down he knew, a few hours a week wasn't enough, not to be a father, and certainly not enough to repair what he had broken. One late night, after the third visit, Daniel sat alone in his penthouse. In the warm glow of a corner lamp, he stared at a photo of Amara, smiling at that long-ago charity event, the only picture he hadn't been able to put away. Then he stood, stepped out onto the balcony. The city sparkled beneath him, but inside, there was only stillness. The next morning, he emailed Carla. I want to start over. Not in court, in myself. Carla didn't ask questions. A week later, Daniel began volunteering at the Harlem Youth Development Center, a place for kids from low-income families. No one there knew he was CEO Daniel Reed. Here, he was just Uncle Dan, the man who folded paper airplanes, told terrible jokes, and listened to children with his full heart. He mopped floors, he spoon-fed toddlers, he listened as kids spoke of fears, dreams, and parents they'd never known. And there, Daniel finally understood. Fatherhood wasn't about court filings or weekly appearances. Fatherhood was about showing up, especially when no one asked you to. A month later, Amara found out by chance. She visited the center during her lunch break. From outside the window, she saw Daniel kneeling to tie a little boy's shoelaces. He didn't know she was there. She watched for a few minutes, then walked away. Her heart wasn't soft yet, but it wasn't burning with fury anymore. For the first time in a long time, she thought. Maybe he wasn't doing this to prove something. Maybe he was doing it because it was right. Daniel didn't ask for forgiveness. He didn't expect acceptance. But in silence, in small daily acts, he stitched together something he hadn't dared to name. Not hope, not yet. Just the chance to be seen again. That night, it poured. A sudden summer storm swept over New York, flooding the streets and shaking old buildings with thunder that cracked like bone. Amara was nursing Leona while Eli slept beside her. Her tiny third-floor apartment in a Brooklyn walk-up still felt like home, but when it rained hard, the roof leaked. She placed a bowl under the drip like always. She didn't complain. She simply endured. Until enduring wasn't enough. A sudden pop came from the kitchen outlet, a flash of sparks, then smoke curled up the wall. Flames caught the curtain in seconds. Amara screamed. Leona in her arms, Eli crying now, no time to think. She clutched both children and ran. By the time she made it to the first floor, the stairwell above was already glowing red. Lana arrived first at the hospital. The second person was Daniel. He nearly burst into the ER after hearing the news from Lana. His shirt was soaked, and when he saw Amara sitting on a bench, face smudged with soot, arms around the twins, he didn't say a word. He just sat beside her. No, are you okay? No, I'll handle everything. He was just there. After a while, Amara spoke, her eyes fixed on the floor. It's all gone, Daniel nodded. I know. I don't have a home. I don't have anything. You have them. And you're still here. She turned to him, eyes red but not from anger this time, just exhaustion. You didn't have to come. He was quiet for a long time, but I needed to stay. Days later, the city placed Amara and the twins in temporary housing. Daniel didn't push. He didn't hover. But each day he brought small things, diapers, wipes, a pot of porridge he'd somehow cooked himself. At first, Amara left it untouched. Then, she ate. And when Eli spiked a low fever, it was Daniel who sat up all night with a thermometer, while Amara finally got a full night's sleep for the first time in months. The following week, Amara stood by the window, watching Daniel on the floor with Leona. He was making a sock puppet, terrible at it. But Leona giggled wildly. Eli crawled over, grabbing his sleeve. She held a mug of tea. Her hands weren't shaking anymore. Maybe he really had changed, not completely, but enough that she didn't feel afraid when she looked at him anymore. She stepped out of the kitchen, placed her mug on the table. Daniel looked up, surprised, but Amara simply said, "Lemza," softly but firmly. "You can stay a bit longer, if you want." And for the first time in almost a year, Daniel felt that this tiny, imperfect space was warmer than any penthouse he had ever owned. 2 months after the fire, Daniel received a notice from the court. The supervision order for his visits had been lifted. The judge acknowledged his consistent behavior, clear commitment, and active participation. But Daniel didn't celebrate. He didn't call anyone. He just sent a quiet message to Amara. "May I visit the kids this Sunday?" No emoji, no explanation, no pressure. To his surprise, Amara replied with a single word. "Okay." That Sunday, Daniel arrived with 2 bags of cookies he'd baked himself. They tasted a little salty because he'd mixed up the sugar. Leona spit the first one out and burst into laughter. Eli ate 3 and had Daniel worrying all afternoon that he might get a stomachache. No more family centers, no observers. Just an ordinary afternoon in a tiny apartment where children's laughter floated in the air, carried on the scent of warm tea and fading daylight. Daniel did puzzles with Eli, read books to Leona. He wasn't trying to be the perfect father anymore. He was just there. He didn't offer wise words, didn't try to teach life lessons, didn't talk about big things. He let the kids just need him. Later that evening, Amara was nursing Leona while Eli napped in Daniel's lap. The room fell quiet. Daniel gently brushed his son's hair and whispered, "Daddy's here." No one asked him to say it. No one needed him to, but for the first time, he believed it. Marae turned. Something in her eyes had softened, not forgiveness, but recognition. "That boy believes in you," she said softly. Daniel smiled and replied, "They're helping me believe in myself." Before leaving, he paused and asked, "Next week, may I take them to the park?" Amara thought for a few seconds, then nodded. "Bring the wipes." Daniel laughed. "I've learned to get the right kind." And just like that, not through grand gestures or perfect words, but through quiet, consistent presence, Daniel had begun becoming a father. 3 months after unsupervised visits became the norm, Daniel received an offer, a senior executive role at his firm's new Singapore branch, a rare opportunity to restructure their entire Asia investment portfolio. Once upon a time, he would have accepted in a heartbeat, no hesitation. But now, he paused. He had once had everything, reputation, power, wealth, but what he had just begun to hold after all his mistakes was the only thing that made him feel truly alive, being a father. Daniel met Amara at the park, where he took Leona and Eli every week. The kids were playing on the slide. Daniel sat beside Amara on the bench. "I've been offered a position in Singapore," he said, straight to the point. Amara looked up. Not surprised. She had always known a moment like this would come. For how long? 3 years, maybe more. "And are you planning to go?" Daniel didn't answer right away. "You lost them once," Amara said slowly. "You can't say you want to be a father and disappear again." Daniel looked at his son tugging at his giggling sister by the slide. "I don't want to go," he said quietly. Then, after a pause, For once, I want to choose something that doesn't come with a bonus. 3 days later, Daniel sent the firm an email declining the offer. No long explanation, just one line. Family matters more. A week later, when Amara came to pick up the twins after a group play session, she was met with a surprise. Daniel standing at the front desk, wearing a name badge that read, Official Volunteer Family Support Program. I signed up for part-time work here, he said, a little awkward. I figured if I'm staying, I should really be present. Amara smiled, not out of sarcasm, not out of pity, just warmly. On the way home, Leona tugged at her mother's sleeve. Daddy's not going away anymore? Amara knelt, hugging her close. No, sweetheart, he chose to stay. Choosing to stay wasn't the end of something for Daniel. It was the first time he didn't run. That autumn, golden leaves blanketed the paths of the park where Daniel often took Leona and Eli on weekends. But this time, Amara came too. She no longer stood from a distance. She sat on the bench, sometimes smiling when Leona fell and picked herself up, or when Eli clung to Daniel's leg asking to be carried. It wasn't a cautious glance anymore. It was presence. Daniel noticed. He didn't name it, but every nod, every time Amara handed him the diaper bag without hesitation, it all felt like silent forgiveness, unspoken but deeply real. One afternoon, after the twins had fallen asleep in their stroller, Daniel and Amara sat on a park bench. Leaves drifted around their feet. I never thought we'd get here, Amara said softly. Daniel didn't ask, get where? He understood. Neither did I. Silence followed. Then Amara turned to him, her eyes for the first time open without defense. I don't forgive everything you did, but I'm not letting it run my life anymore. Daniel nodded. I don't need you to forget, just to know. I'm not walking away again. Conversations became more frequent, not because they were getting back together, but because they had learned to walk side by side as parents. Daniel began taking Leona and Eli to his place 1 day a week, just for a few hours, then a full day, then overnight. His luxury condo gradually turned into a world of toys, scribbled drawings, and joyful noise. He no longer lived like a successful single man, but like a real father, clumsy, tired, but deeply content. At Christmas, Daniel gave Amara a special gift, a handmade photo book filled with everyday moments, from that very first visit to the day Leona called him daddy without prompting. The last page showed the four of them sitting together on the grass, sunlight filtering through the trees. Below it, a simple caption. Not a perfect family, but ours. Amara didn't say anything at first, but after Daniel left, she flipped through every page, and tears fell, not from sorrow, but from relief. On New Year's Eve, Amara texted Daniel. Thank you, she texted. Then, after a pause, for showing up and staying. Daniel replied a moment later. I'm not the man I used to be, but everything I do now is for you and the kids. And so, after the storms, through all the breaking and mending, they didn't need to say I love you to begin again. Because sometimes, love isn't about returning. It's about walking forward together in a new way.